This is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by West Virginia University, offering education, healthcare, and the opportunity to achieve career success since 1867. Information at wvu.edu.
Sonesta Suites in Charleston, an extended stay hotel located near the airport, downtown, and the state capitol. More at sonesta.com.
Solar Holler, supporting Appalachian communities and building on West Virginia's history of powering the nation by bringing solar energy and battery backup to homeowners, nonprofits, and businesses throughout the region. More at solarholler.com.
Welcome to the Legislature Today. I'm Curtis Tate. The Senate met on Friday and passed several bills without discussion. Some of those had previously garnered debate. One such bill was House Bill 2172, adding an athletic trainer to the Board of Physical Therapy. Senator Eric Tarr, a Republican from Putnam County and a physical therapist by trade, moved to amend the bill during Thursday's floor session, sparking debate among members. Tarr's amendment would have maintained the size of the board, but allowed for dual licensure to allow an athletic trainer who is also a physical therapist to sit on the board, something he argued was a cost-saving measure. Senator Patricia Rucker, a Republican from Jefferson County, rose in opposition to Tarr's amendment, calling the original legislation a simple and important addition to give athletic trainers representation on the board that oversees them. Tarr's amendment failed, and the bill passed during Friday's floor session with 29 yeas, 4 nays, and 1 absent or not voting. Friday's floor session also took place during ongoing inclement weather that has dumped about 1.5 inches of rain on the central part of the state, but anywhere from 3 to 4 inches of rain on the western part of the state in the past 2 days, according to the National Weather Service. Senator Rupi Phillips, a Republican from Logan County, rose to ask his colleagues for help in drafting a resolution to send to Washington to clean out the streams in his county and many others like it in the southern coal fields.
Right now, currently in Logan County, we're flooding again. I've been trying to work on a resolution to send to D.C. to get the Army Corps involved, to get DEP involved, stream restoration. We have to fix this. It's not even been a little over a month, and we're back again. Mr. President, I'm going to ask everyone to please pitch in, and hopefully before end of session, we can get a resolution together to send to D.C. and say we need to do something. These streams are full of just fuel and everything. There's islands in the middle of the Gandock River that something needs to be done. We need to get this flooding under control. We can't continue to get FEMA to come down here. And that's your tax dollars that FEMA's spending. And thank God that we have them. But we need to do something to prevent any flooding.
It's the House's turn this year to have the bill that will be the vehicle for the budget. The bill was considered in the House today. Briana Heaney has that story.
Delegate Vernon Criss, the chair of the Finance Committee, presented the budget to the full House today.
The governor's introduced estimate was $5,323,157,000.
Criss said part of the process is compromising with the Senate's bill, something he says is currently in the works.
The Senate will take up theirs probably Monday, and then our bill will be over there on Monday. At some point in the first part of next week, the Senate chairman and his budget staff and my budget staff and myself and vice chairman will sit down and go through each of the budgets to determine where the differences are and then come to some kind of mutual agreement. And before the end of next week, obviously, we will have a compromised budget.
Many Democrats threw many amendments at the budget, none of which stuck. Those amendments would have increased funding for things like the flood resiliency program and childcare in the state.
Delegate Kayla Young, a Democrat from Kanawha County, proposed an amendment that would increase funding for childcare in the state.
I'm hoping that this time's third time the charm. I will be changing the line item for the child care maintenance of effort match by adding $32 million. If we do not do this right now, 2,000 families will lose their child care on July 1st, so I hope you'll support it.
Delegate Clay Riley, a Republican from Clay County and the vice chair of the Finance Committee, urged rejection. He said the House version of the bill gave increases to child care when compared with the governor's budget and last year's budget. Young said that's still not enough.
We have the lowest workforce participation in the country. And once again, 2,000 families will lose their child care on July 1 of this year because we're no longer using TANF money to pay for it. So I urge adoption.
The amendment failed.
Debate's been closed. Question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. Chair declares the amendment lost.
Young says she hopes that child care gets funding some way, somehow. If not through the budget, then at least through supplements. The problem with supplements, though, is that it's one-time funding.
A supplemental would be great. Any additional money for childcare would be great, but if we can't rely on it, and a supplemental is going to be one-time money versus just saying this is going to be in the budget from here on out. Of course, we change it every year, but you put your priorities in the front of the budget and childcare stays about the same. It has decreased about 25% in the last 10 years, so we're spending less on childcare than we did when we know inflation is rising.
And there are multiple factors driving up the cost of childcare. Last year, the federal government mandated a permanent switch from attendance-based pay to enrollment-based pay.
Yeah, so the federal rule changed during the pandemic to say that we would go to an enrollment-based model versus an attendance-based model on how we pay for childcare subsidies, which is a great thing. It stabilizes childcare facilities. However, for the past few years, they've sent additional funds to help pay for that. Well, those funds have all expired. So we've been pulling money from other sources to pay for it for the past few years so more folks could get access to childcare. Well, that's all gone, and the state is refusing to put in any more money to do so. So my amendment was to make sure that those folks would have it. So since it didn't pass, we'll now see 2,000 families lose child care this July.
The state was funding the change with COVID-era federal dollars, which have all dried up now. Sean O'Leary, with the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, says the state has steadily been backing away from funding child care over the past 10 years.
Right now what the state spends on child care is less than half of what it spent about 5-6 years ago. So we're not investing as much in child care as we did in the past.
He says the state has the money to make a bigger investment into child care.
That's important for the people of the state. It's important for the workforce. It's important for parents. It's important for children. We want high quality child care for every child in the state. We want every parent who wants to work able to work and not be held back because of child care. So it's important that the state funds that. And with the House budget, they're leaving $60 million on the table to have a surplus when that money could be used to support child care.
The budget now heads over to the Senate for consideration. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Briana Heaney at the Capitol.
Each week throughout this legislative session, our high school reporters have filed stories that interest them as young members of the community. This week, Emma Browning and Malia Sarr wanted to examine legislation affecting the foster care system in the state.
Welcome to today's student segment. I'm Emma Browning.
And I'm Malia Sarr. Today we want to discuss issues relating to foster care in West Virginia.
West Virginia has the highest rate of children in foster care in the nation, with just under 6,000 kids.
This year there have been many bills dealing with foster care in our state. Recently, 2 of these bills have made movement in the legislature.
In the House of Delegates, Bill 2027 passed on March 26th. The hope of this bill is to prevent children from constantly moving from home to home and to better find a permanent situation.
This bill makes reuniting siblings an option rather than a requirement. The Department of Human Services would be in charge of this process.
Current state law says that the department shall prioritize sibling reunification. The proposed bill would change wording from shall to may.
Jim McKay, a state coordinator for Prevent Child Abuse West Virginia, said that he disagrees with the bill and said West Virginia should be taking actions to keep brother and sisters together, not make it easier to separate them.
There are differing views on House Bill 2027, but it ended in a vote of 97 votes in favor and 2 opposed. The bill has been communicated to the Senate.
On the Senate side, we've seen the passage of Bill 83. This focuses on sharing confidential information concerning foster care children.
Each foster care child has an ombudsman. Their job is to advocate for the welfare of the child. They investigate and make recommendations for placement of children who enter foster care.
Senate Bill 83 would allow the Ombudsman to access confidential records relating to child abuse, neglect, and fatalities.
Currently, the required confidentiality of welfare records may limit the ability of overseers to fully understand a child's situation or address circumstances when making the most appropriate decisions regarding placement.
This bill passed the Senate unanimously. Supporters argue that it will empower the Ombudsman to better stand up for children in the foster care system and ensure that cases of abuse and neglect are thoroughly examined.
Increased access to information could lead to more informed recommendations regarding child welfare.
The bill is now in the Health and Human Resource Committee of the House.
Thanks for viewing today. This is Emma Browning
and Malia Sarr for the Legislature Today.
For our reporter roundtable this week, Briana Heaney and I are joined by Sarah Elbeshbishi. She is the nonprofit newsroom Mountain State Spotlight's energy and environment reporter. Hey Bree, welcome Sarah. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to drop the B word on you. Budget. It's that time. You know, we got a week to go, and they need to get it done. They're actually required to. Bree, what do you think?
Yeah. So the Senate presented its budget yesterday, and the House passed its budget today. So things are moving as far as the budget goes.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
What is an interesting aspect of it as far as you can see?
Yeah, so, well, just a quick overview on the budget. It is supposedly the House's year to have the budget bill.
They take turns.
Yeah, and what does that mean? Basically nothing in a lot of ways, right? Because the Senate will probably go ahead and put in their version of what they want to be the budget, which could include pieces of what the House has now or not. And they'll basically propose a strike and replace. This is one thing they could do if they stick with, the House being the vehicle. They'll basically propose a strike and replace amendment that'll just replace the current budget with everything with their new budget, right? With their Senate budget. And that's not just like our road or the highway type thing. There's a reason they do that. It would be hard. The budget is a huge document, and it would be hard to go line by line and make little changes here and little changes there, and it all still come together. So it's a little bit easier for them to incorporate parts of the current House budget and then their changes, and then just strike and replace it all. That being said, they, as I said, released their budget yesterday. The House budget has passed. So next week, we'll start to see how this all plays out. As far as things that I've been watching in the budget, I spent a few weeks leading up to this session going around and talking to child care facilities. What do they need? What are they hoping for? What are the challenges that they're facing? And a lot of them are barely holding on. And that was prior to this session. Now we're at the tail end of this session. And mind you, going into last year's session, the darling subject that was supposed to get bipartisan support was childcare. I heard Republicans and Democrats in both chambers saying, we're going to do something to address childcare. By the end of that session, goose egg on bills addressing childcare. They did pass a small tax relief bill during an extraordinary session in October, but I think it would be pretty fair to say that that was a small bill. It was a tax credit, it was non-refundable. Going into this session, I was hearing similar things from legislators that they wanted to address childcare. We're at the end of that session and we're looking at the budget, and there's actually likely going to be, between what's happening on the federal level and what's happening on the state level, there's likely actually going to be to West Virginians a cut to our investment in childcare. Again, that's between the federal and state government. And so that's going to affect a lot of families. Not only do we have that, there are some signals in the stock market right now that we could be going into a recession. That is also going to take a hit to child care centers because they rely on people to be working, to need their services and to be able to afford their services.
The services, yeah.
Anybody who's ever had a child in child care knows it's a very, very expensive service.
Yes.
So it's not looking right now with the current budget and also with kind of the current economic outlook. it's not looking great for childcare providers.
Well, another thing that's top of mind because of the weather this week and in recent weeks, flood resiliency. Sarah, talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's something I've been keeping an eye out for. I wrote a story about it at the beginning of the session, right after we saw the floods in southern West Virginia. In the governor's proposed budget, there wasn't any money for that flood resiliency trust fund that the legislature had created a few years ago. It sat empty since it was created by the legislature. And so currently it doesn't look like either budget has included any funding for that.
Has it even come up?
Delegate Hornbuckle introduced an amendment on the floor today.
Sean Hornbuckle, minority leader,
was trying to get $50 million from the rainy day fund into the resiliency fund, which did not pass. He introduced a bill earlier this session to move $250 million from like various pockets into that resiliency trust fund, which didn't manifest. The bill didn't go anywhere. So right now, it looks like it's unlikely to get funding, but there still is a week. So hopefully, maybe, given the weather and the recovery efforts in southern West Virginia, there's not a non-zero chance, but it doesn't seem very likely.
Seems like, well, I was just going to say, we've had some rainy days, so rainy day fund, well, anyway.
Well, and the crazy thing about like the debate on the floor today was this is all happening in a backdrop of a catastrophic weather event in southern West Virginia that was the backdrop to really all of this year's session.
Right.
That happened early on in session. Mm-hmm. It's ongoing. On top of that, we're in a state of emergency as of right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And literally 2 feet from the House doors, from the House chamber, VOAD, a bunch of different advocacy groups and
resiliency organizations that are dedicated to prevention and mitigation of natural disasters, including flooding, which is something that West Virginia is highly susceptible to. It has one of the highest risks for flooding, something that we're going to continue to see, and flooding is we're going to see it more frequently, and also even more it's going to be even more catastrophic, because of the terrain, and we're going to see more rain and water and so.
Well, and there's some question about what level of support states will receive from the federal government, because there's been talk about eliminating FEMA or drastically reducing its footprint, so that could have a big impact. But Sarah, I wanted to ask you about a really interesting story that you had this week, on a somewhat related note, about the West Virginia Rivers Coalition and the West Virginia Coal Association. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we saw them on the same side, which I don't.
What?
I know. They gave us a scare. They both opposed this bill that was, it was called the Sound Science and Regulations Act, which would really would limit what kind of science and studies and research state agencies could use in developing regulations. It would require them to use journals that, scientific journals that don't charge publication fees, which often they do to cover operational costs. It would require them to only use data and studies that are peer reviewed, which was kind of the problem for the Coal Association. There, a lot of data and testing that they do when they're getting permits and stuff can come from samples collected around, the industry, by DEP, by the industry itself, and stuff like that. And that's not collected. That's not peer reviewed. It's collected, and it's site specific. And West Virginia Rivers also brought that up because that, would prevent agencies from using data that they've collected, that they've studied and researched as well. Rivers also warned that it would create a very, very, very high level of burden of proof for some of those public health studies and research. The text or the bill required proof of causal harm, which Rivers was kind of saying it's hard because you can't test on humans. Like, we're not allowed to do those types of things. So proving that would be a very high standard of proof that would prevent state agencies from using, a lot of science that we've relied on for decades and centuries at this point.
Which is very interesting to have those two groups in the same room and not on opposite sides. We have a few more minutes. I wanted to give Bree an opportunity to talk about something that's near and dear to a lot of us in journalism, which is the Freedom of Information Act. What can you tell us about that, Bree?
Yeah, we call it a FOIA,
yes.
Which is like the acronym just said.
Mm-hmm.
So House Bill 3412. It doesn't change anything as of now, but it sets the framework to make it a lot easier for internal workings of the House to change things. So essentially right now, if let's say the House wanted to change its FOIA policy, they would need to pass a full bill, meaning that would need to go through a double committee process. There would be now built into that double committee process a quasi akin to like public hearing type process, the hearing process where stakeholders, like for example, Doug Scaff, who spoke to the Rules Committee about this.
He was a legislator himself.
He was both a legislator, and now he is the interim executive director for West Virginia's Associated Press
Association.
Press Association. Yes.
It's also a newspaper publisher.
Yes. So he spoke in front of Rules, but essentially right now it would go through that double committee process. There would be a hearing where stakeholders could weigh in, and then it would go to the full floor to be voted on as a bill. If this bill passes, House Bill 3412, it would change it to a resolution. So essentially, what would happen is that resolution would be drafted in House rules, or not in House rules, but by House leadership. And then it would be presented. It wouldn't go through the committee process. It would just be presented to the floor. So you wouldn't get stakeholders wouldn't necessarily, through the process, get a chance to weigh in, it would just get those votes, and it would just have to pass that chamber. So that's a pretty big change. And I think that one thing that was raised is Speaker Hanshaw said, I have no intention of decreasing transparency, and this is just to organize things better and to declutter state code and everything like that. But even though that may be, and that stated his intentions, it will give speakers even in the future who are not him, again, more power to change FOIA.
Well, unless he doesn't plan on leaving, of course. Well, we've only got about a minute left. I wanted to bring up one thing that's been a big priority for Governor Patrick Morrisey, and that's expanding the number of microgrids in the state to bring data centers here. They need a lot of land, they require a lot of electricity, they require a lot of water, and West Virginia does have sites like that, and there is a bill that just passed the House this week, House Bill 2014, to make this a reality. But sometimes these things don't move at the pace of a state legislature.
Yeah.
And Pennsylvania just this week announced that it landed a huge data center project with a huge natural gas plant, and it's at the site of a former coal power plant. And Governor Morrisey talked about a backyard brawl in his State of the State address. Well, at least right now, Pennsylvania and Governor Shapiro appear to be winning that backyard brawl. Any final words on that or anything else?
There's a concern that the costs will be paid by ratepayers because of those things. So that's been...
Or taxpayers.
Yeah.
So
that's been a concern about that I'll bring up.
Yeah. Well, anyway, lots of stuff to pay attention to in the final week of the session. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Sarah Elbeshbishi joining me and Briana Heaney in our studio to discuss the legislative session. That's it for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Catch the Legislature Today Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. And remember, West Virginia Public Broadcasting covers the session daily in our radio news program, West Virginia Morning, and on our news site, wvpublic.org. We broadcast the daily floor sessions of both the House and the Senate on the West Virginia channel. I'm Curtis Tate. Good evening, and see you here again next week, the last week.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by West Virginia University, offering education, healthcare, and the opportunity to achieve career success since 1867. Information at wvu.edu.
Sonesta Suites in Charleston, an extended stay hotel located near the airport, downtown, and the state capitol. More at sonesta.com.
Solar Hauler, supporting Appalachian communities and building on West Virginia's history of powering the nation by bringing solar energy and battery backup to homeowners, nonprofits, and businesses throughout the region. More at solarhauler.com.